Joining me on Startup Report is the second in our series on Tampa Bay Wave Tech Diversity cohort members. We have Jaeson Bang, who I'm going to go on a limb and say has the coolest name of anybody that we'll be talking to in this series. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Joe.
So you started Oracle Health, and you have a cardiology background. So I think let's start with a little product demo because you kind of showed me what you had going on. It was pretty cool. So can you explain the product?
Sure. It's a tiny little implantable device, insertable device about the size of a paper clip, a little bit thicker. And we insert it just under the skin. And we make a 1/4-inch incision right up the chest area. And using this insertion tool, we inject and then put tape over it. And this is a very common procedure that is being utilized right now. Several thousand of these are being done every month, every year. So it's pretty straightforward, minimally invasive type of procedure.
So it sits on top of the rib cage?
More like just under the skin. Under the front of the rib cage area. Yeah.
Okay. And then what is the function of the device? How does it operate?
Sure. It has a single lead ECG, so it records the electrical activity of your heart, and has a digital stethoscope, so it listens to the mechanical aspect of your heart, and then has an accelerometer that follows your movement and your orientation. So all that data is actually quite important in analyzing cardiac performance. And all that data goes to the phone to the cloud, where we do a machine learning. So it's almost like a physician checking your ECG and listening to your heart sound, except we do it constantly for 3-year duration.
And how does it transmit the data? Does the user have to start the app and then does it transmit the data in batch, or is it always running in the background and consistently transmitting the data?
Great question. It's on a batch, and it doesn't look for it constantly. The patient doesn't have to do anything. As long as the patient carries a smartphone with them, the device will look for it at a designated time period, and batch data will be transferred to the phone using what we call Bluetooth Low Energy. Very different than the speaker that you're used to. It's a different technology.
You can't double duty then, so you can turn your chest into a speaker, is what you're saying?
No, you can't do it.
And then when that data hits the cloud, what happens next?
So all the data goes into the cloud. We do machine learning, and imagine billions of data points, and we'll do a comprehensive analysis. And then the physician on the other side has the access to that information. So if a patient having any kind of trouble with the heart, they can look it up and say, well, it does look pretty bad, go to the ER or come to the office, and they can triage it there.
And I'm assuming that there's some sort of alert system if the AI picks up any irregularities that it can push notify the doctor.
Kind of, not to a point where a physician get notified, because they become data overloaded. So physicians and the patients actually do not want this type of information to be constantly alerting physician. And these are for chronic heart failure patients. So their condition does not change dramatically over a couple of day period. So we'll be looking for trending changes.
Got it. So it's more just long-term tracking than it is worrying about stopping an emergency situation.
Right. So if you have an emergency, you have to do what's right for you as a patient, which is usually call 911 or whatever that needs to be done to help yourself. But waiting for a device to treat is not the solution for this one.
So with this device, then it wouldn't, because a lot of times, the minor. I mean, I'm again speaking from assumption here, but wouldn't there be electrical changes in the heart before the patient noticed it? So isn't there not an early warning benefit to this?
Yeah, if this one is called heart failure. It's not like a heart attack or other diseases where you see changes in electrical activity, what we call the elevated QT or things like that. ST. So this is a general performance where ECG does not play a big role in it, more like the heart sound will. That's why the device has a heart sound listening capability.
Cool. So let's dig a little bit into how the company started. You have a rich experience in the cardiac space. How did you decide to develop this, and then who came along with you?
So I started at Medtronic in the pacemakers and defibrillator division, and then also did a lot of the product development, especially the remote monitoring. So it was very early stage. My job was to convince a bunch of elderly patients in Florida to adapt to a telemedicine 15 years ago. Before it was wireless, they had to plug it in. dial it up, that kind of stuff. So we grew that business from an inception to a $700 million business, left to two Silicon Valley startups to do a similar type of technology, where we, as a group, we raised total of about $700 million in two different companies to go after heart failure, treatment of heart failure. Went to Europe for 2 years, ran the European operations, ran the US operations. And I just left about a year and a half ago to start my own. So instead of doing open heart surgeries, open neck surgeries to treat these patients, I decided to go after monitoring them with a much simpler solution.
Interesting. So when you say you had there were the two startups in there, was this part of the company you were with, or did you have a group of founders that went to two separate entities and started two companies together?
It's a group of companies that I was working for. So one company raised about $400 million altogether, and the second company that I joined as an employee raised about $300 million.
And was there any overlap in the people from the first company to the second company, or were there just two separate jumps that you made?
Two separate jumps. I'm the only overlap.
So you kind of had two training rounds then, and then you said, I'm ready to do it myself.
Yeah. And not only just the regular training, it was probably the most complex surgeries in the world at that time, still is. We were inventing a surgical technique. We're inventing tools to do it, inventing machines to do it. So everything was brand new. And it was probably, still today, one of the most complex surgical techniques that I can think of.
So you had a rich experience on the product side. How have you found filling in the rest of the needs of a startup to business side, the raising side, marketing, HR, and all that good stuff? How has that filled in for you, and how versus what your expectations were before going out on your own?
Yeah, it's challenging, of course, but having that corporate experience and then bona fide startup experience really helped. So as a field operations expert, I was able to really dig into the technology side, as well as the clinical side, the HR, and the financials. So, I was able to wear multiple hats, but not just wear it and take it off, but live in it, in a deep dive method. So that I really get to learn and experience the tiny, small difficulties they face every day.
And then what's been the nucleus of the company as you've started it? Who have you brought in to help you, and in what areas?
Yeah, sure. So I wanted to bring real physicians that were seeing the patients day to day. So I brought quite a bit of physicians from that side. So I have a Harvard clinician, also a Stern cardiology, and Ohio State cardiologist. So these are top notch, but not only that, but they are actually physicians that really work with patients. And on the scientific side, I have a couple of team members with over 30, 40 years of experience in medical device development. So all of us are veterans in our own respective field, and I brought them together to build this device.
And in the startup space, this it's often that startups, a lot of products like this, are started in bigger companies, mainly because you have three areas that you have to deal with. You have the hardware element, you have the software and operating system element, and then you have the AI and and that piece of it as well. So that's a big mountain to climb. As a solo startup, how have you found that?
Yeah, it's definitely challenging. But even for big companies nowadays, they are not capable of tackling all this multiple expertise, and nobody can. Nobody can be an expert in everything. So they are contracting out these type of expertise to a select group of vendors, and those are the same companies that I work with for the past 15 years. So, like hardware guys, they are the designer and manufacturer of pacemakers and defibrillators for big companies. So they're building my device. And the AI portion are the same guys that are doing the AI for the big companies. So I'm tapping into the resource-rich expertise and bring them in together.
And this is because of that, and because of the access of circuit boards and production and freelance software help. Is this a company that you could have started 10 years ago or 15 years ago, or is it really just something that's opened up recently for everybody to have access to?
Actually, that's a very good question. I thought about the company 5 years ago, and it was impossible. The technology-wise, absolutely doable. The data transfer, unavailable at that time. Now it is. Data analysis was, but it was incredibly expensive. Literally 150 engineers were working on it to do something that I can do as a team with one or two right now at fraction of the cost. So that's actually very funny you asked me that, because I couldn't get it done at that time. But past 2 years, this was absolutely possible.
So just in all honesty, did it cross your mind to put an RJ45 jack in the chest at any point?
What's the RJ45?
Or Ethernet port. Sorry, Ethernet port. Because you said you had dial-up with some of your early customers back in the day.
No need to do it. At that time, it was a radio frequency, so you actually had to put some kind of wand over it, and it communicates that way. And actually, still works pretty well, but it's not as elegant as smartphone solution that we have now. And even the big companies, they thought about this a while back. And how do you make something small, but nobody can use it? So the smartphone really changed the game.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about Tampa Bay Wave. How did you come to find out about the tech diversity cohort and decide to participate?
I ran into Richard Munassi at a get-together kind of environment at Tampa Wave. And I pitched the idea to him. He liked it, and we talked for a while, and then had the opportunity to present to the team and got accepted. And before that, I was also a part of another accelerator in Tennessee. So that was very good stepping stone to get to here. And also got accepted to Johnson & Johnson's J Labs. Oh. That also helped.
Dr. Manassi is a rainmaker. Our last guest was Leah from Winter Innovations, and that's how she came to know it as well. And I think she was up in Tennessee too.
Yeah, we were in the same accelerator. Yep.
Right. And that was to get that fast-tracked, is it the 530?
510.
510? Or was it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so is that still something that's on your radar to try to run through that approval process?
Yeah, and that's really important for a device like mine to have a 510K designation. It's already there because we're following a similar device. And more so is the reimbursement. So there's an established reimbursement, meaning the physicians and the hospitals can provide the service and actually compensate for their work. So a lot of the devices that does not have reimbursement, it's an uphill battle asking a physician to provide a free service.
Right. Got it. So when you say reimbursement, you mean insurance and insurance code? Yeah. Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And I'm always curious, what's going to be your customer acquisition strategy? Is this straight sales, traditional sales device or medical device sales process, or do you have some unique angles you're going to try and go for?
Sure. It's very different than traditional sales because our device requires our implanting representative to have a clinical understanding and scientific understanding of the device. So we have a very narrow and focused group called the electrophysiologists. This is a subspecialty of cardiology that work on pacemakers, defibrillators, and cardiac arrhythmias. And then there's another subgroup called heart failure physicians. So they work in conjunction to find the patient and implant the device. So good example is like orthopedics. They would have thousands of physicians, and you have to sell it to many of them to move the needle. Whereas in my case, I just need to focus on a very small group of physicians to move the needle. And our market is much bigger than any other. Like, for example, 3,000 physicians, they command over $12 billion market.
Wow. Well, that's efficient.
Very efficient. Yeah.
So then as it stands now, what's next for the company? What are the next big milestones that you're hoping to achieve?
Yeah, so I have a couple strategic partners that we're working with. The animal lab human testing is fully financed. So that was saving of at least $300,000. And then we're looking at a battery solution from a strategic partner, hopefully at a very low price, maybe a saving of about $1 million just from that. So we're going to build a device to implant in patients that will give us the most comprehensive cardiac data in the to date.
Sounds like an ambitious and worthy endeavor. And I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
The conversation. And
sure.
You are Tampa located, so I'm sure we'll see you around, and hopefully we get to have an in-person demo day because those are always fun.
Yep.
If
Yep.
not, I'll look forward to connecting with you sometime once we get past the coronavirus pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a tough time for everybody. So, stay safe and hang in there.
Thank you, Jay.